Okay, thank you everyone so much for joining us today for our workshop. You need a plan preparing for portfolio reviews. My name is Eilish. I am the Associate Director of Career Advising at the Creative Careers team. I'm joined today by my colleague, Kayla Carrillo. She is our Career Pathways Advisor. You may have seen one or both of us in an advising appointment to chat a little bit about your professional direction. And so we're very excited to be here with you today. We have some exciting info to share with you that includes how to prep for a portfolio review, what you should include when you're actually in the portfolio review. We're going to include a little act out with Kayla and I to kind of see what this interaction might look like. And then we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions, for concerns, anything like that that pops up. And for anybody who is just tuning in, we are recording this presentation, so it will be available on our YouTube channel after the fact, so that you can always come back and watch it later. So let's dive right on in. Our agenda for today, I want us to talk about what a portfolio review actually is, so that we are all on the same page, what it is and kind of what it isn't, because that's really important. We're going to talk about what you should do before your review even happens. For those of you who have scheduled portfolio reviews that are upcoming, this is a great time to start kind of finalizing some of these pieces just to make sure that everything's good to go on the day of. We're going to talk about how to start and kind of introduce yourself successfully, how you will want to present your work, how to end effectively, and then we're just going to wrap up with some big concepts, and that'll be our time to chat through any questions that anybody has. So, what is a portfolio review? A portfolio review is a collaborative, typically brief conversation where, as a designer, you're going to walk through a stakeholder. That could be a fellow designer, a hiring manager, a recruiter, somebody who falls into that umbrella, through some of the projects in your portfolio to showcase specifically your process, your problem-solving skills, and your design decisions. It's really important to note that this is the set of skill sets that you are showcasing. It's your process, your problem-solving skills, and your design decisions. Your focus here is going to be on storytelling, highlighting how you handled any constraints or potential concerns, how you collaborated and achieved results. It's not just about displaying your final visual assets. This is important because I want all of us to think about a portfolio review not as an opportunity to, so to speak, sell our designs, but rather to showcase how we approach design work, which is where we can get really important, effective feedback, which is the goal of the portfolio review. In general, a portfolio review is something that may lead to an internship opportunity, a freelance opportunity, a job opportunity. But in the immediate, it's also a really wonderful opportunity to gain feedback that you can use to improve both your process and your portfolio for future opportunities of a similar sort. So we want to use our time, which is usually limited, to optimize the quality of the feedback that we can receive. So again, our focus is going to be on the process that we've used. We're really going to incorporate our storytelling skills, which is, what is the story of this design? What is the story of our process? What is the story of how we handle challenges? We're going to provide a lot of context. We're really going to make sure that the quality of our work is bound in the context of how our work was created. So the design brief, the constraints that we had, etc. And again, we're focusing on feedback and growth opportunities. So you're going to see something shortly, which really advocates for you to ask for what you want. And by that, I don't just mean sharing that you want an internship or sharing that you want a job, although that is something that you can do if you know that a company is hiring for a role that you're interested in. What I mean by that, rather, is if you want feedback about a specific thing, if there's something in particular that you're unsure about, this is your opportunity to professionally and appropriately ask for the information that is going to be most beneficial for you. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that in the review itself when we get to our role play. So, before your review, there's a few things that I recommend that you do to really optimize the time that you have with your reviewer. A portfolio review can be anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes, all the way up to an hour. But for the most part, when you're participating in a portfolio review that's happening through Art Center, like facilitated by the Creative Careers Office or your academic department, it's going to be on the shorter end, which means that you really need to make use of that time. So curating your work in advance for the review and the time limit is going to be really helpful. That means picking one or two projects that you feel are best representative of your skill set and the projects that you're most interested in receiving feedback on, and only focusing on those projects. Not necessarily sharing everything that you've ever done and asking for feedback on a whole body of work, but rather context bound within one or two specific projects. Second, you want to consider how you're going to be sharing your work. Typically, you're going to do this one of two ways. First, directly from your portfolio website. Second, by preparing a slide deck or a PDF that just includes the images and sketches and processes from the one or two projects that you've chosen. Whichever one you do is going to depend on what you find most feasible and effective for you, but I'm going to run through pros and cons of both. If you're going to use your website, you don't have to make something new. That's an immediate pro, right? You already have this information or this resource built out. A con of your website, or using your website, I should say, is that you have to plan your actions in order to move through your website in a way that your reviewer is going to understand. You're going to need to plan how you're clicking through things and where you want to stop and focus on a certain project page. You're going to want to kind of script out yourself to make sure that you hit the important points that you want to in this whole big body of work. You're also going to want to make sure that you're not moving too fast through your website, right? You probably have viewed this project 1,000 times. And so all of it is, past news for you, but your reviewer is likely seeing this for the first or maybe the second time. And so it's all fresh for them. And we don't want to speed run through it too quickly before they have the ability to really understand what it is that they're actually seeing in order for them to give you good feedback. If you're deciding to make a PDF, a pro of this is that you get to choose exactly what you're sharing. You don't have to worry about navigating around a website and clicking and scrolling too fast. You get to choose exactly what they see, which is great. And all you need to do there is choose, again, your final and process images. You know what you want to say about them. And you kind of had that script in your head already because you've made it via the actual PDF you've made. A con is that this takes some additional time, right? You have to set aside time to design out this PDF that you want to use. You have to choose which images go into it. It's kind of like deciding, do you want to spend time rehearsing a walkthrough of your website or practicing and creating the PDF? Either way, it is important to spend that time because, again, you will have limited time with your reviewer. You want to make sure that you're using it as effectively as you possibly can. And finally, you want to try to prepare some questions for your reviewer. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of these questions can be kind of once we get into the review itself, but you might have some questions that you already want to ask. So what are some areas that you think I should work on? What are the top 3 skills that you feel are important to succeed in an environment like this studio or this company? Think about what those questions are in advance so that on the day of the review, you're not kind of floundering or nervous about what you can ask or what you should ask. Something else that you might want to do in advance of your review and I'm really going to encourage you to do this, is test your technology. Whether you are sharing from your website or from a PDF, having functioning technology is going to be really important. So if you are on a Wi-Fi connection, again, you're sharing perhaps your website or you are tuning into a virtual portfolio review, you really want to make sure that your Wi-Fi is working well. Make sure that you're in a place that has good Wi-Fi. Make sure that you are in a place where if, for example, the Wi-Fi goes down, you can perhaps connect via an Ethernet cable or something similar. And along this same umbrella, consider how you can perhaps muffle sound or create a good series of lighting to make sure that you are clearly lit, that your screen is clearly lit, all of those things that can go into making the situation as ideal as possible. For a virtual review, which is often what a lot of reviews that happen on campus involve, you really want to practice screen sharing through whatever tool so that you can go directly into the screen sharing function when you hop into the review and immediately bring up your portfolio. We really don't want to be in this space of, can you see my screen? Can you not see my screen? Having to ask somebody back and forth, can you see it now? Can you not see it now? Why can't you see it now? Again, losing valuable time trying to figure out the basics of your webcasting technology. So practice that a couple of times. And you'll also be able to tell, again, depending on whether you're choosing to share your website or a PDF, which shares best using the tool that you were going to be using for that review. And then finally, try to make sure that you have your portfolio open beforehand and either close or minimize the other windows that are on your device. Don't have your portfolio, if you're using your website, open on a window that has 1,000 other tabs open, like the Reddit posts that you've been reviewing that day or your personal email address. Try to make sure that you are just including that one page. If you have a PDF of your portfolio, make sure, again, that it is standalone in its own window. So the only thing that a reviewer can see when they're looking at your screen, whether that's in person or virtual, is the content of your portfolio itself. Again, this really helps to maximize the impact of both your professionalism and the time that you have with them, which will be limited when what you're really looking for is some strong, intensive feedback on your work itself. So then we move into the day of the review itself and starting really successfully. Again, we're trying to make best use of our time here. So we want to not forget to introduce ourselves. And ideally, when we do this, they will introduce themselves back to us. I know that you have already kind of informally been introduced to who they are, and they have been informally introduced to you by way of, often applying for or being chosen for a portfolio review. But taking the opportunity to reiterate your name is going to be really, really important in this particular circumstance. Make sure you say your name slowly and distinctly. And if they don't offer their name back, you can ask them, can you just share your name with me for a second time, just so that I know exactly how it's pronounced? And again, this is a really great opportunity to be explicit about what you need in your review experience. So we're going to talk about what this can sound like in a minute. But what I mean by that is, what are you specifically looking for feedback on? What do you want to know about what your projects say about you, what your process says about you, in order to get the most out of this review experience? So, what might this sound like? I'm going to pretend that I'm a student who is participating in a review, and this is what it would sound like potentially for me to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Eilish Russell. It's nice to meet you. I'm a fifth term illustration design student, and I'm interested in editorial design, specifically for books and magazines. Before we start, I wanted to quickly share what I'm hoping to get feedback on. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on my projects, specifically my approach and the way that I tackle editorial briefs. I'm trying to understand how my portfolio reads overall and what I could improve on if I'm preparing to graduate in the fall. I've selected a couple of projects that I think best represent the direction that I'm excited about. And I'm going to start with a project that's called Time. But as we go through, please feel free to jump in and ask questions or offer feedback because I'm really interested in hearing your perspective. When I share this overall, what my current situation is, kind of again, what program I'm in, where I'm in the program. So I'm a fifth term student. Um, and what I want from my reviewer, they are better prepared to give me the feedback that is most applicable to what I need, right? And that is going to be super individual to all of you. So think about, again, how you want to introduce yourself and what some of those needs or asks are in advance so that you can really make use of that time. So now we're going to get into talking about our work and we're going to get into our little act out role play situation. Thank you again, Kayla, for joining me today. Kayla will be our reviewer, and I, again, will be our student. So when you're presenting your work, you want to try to have a main talking point for each piece or project that you show. This is going to be your overall. This is what my project represents. And then you're going to want to be able to talk about your process. Depending on the amount of time that you have with your reviewer, which you should ideally know in advance, you can shorten this description of your process. You can elongate this description of your process. What you may also do is decide to introduce two projects in a row with that, 1 to 2 brief sentences, and then ask your reviewer, which of these would you most like to start with? Is there one that excites your interest a little bit more than the other? A reviewer that's really excited to see what they're looking at is going to be more excited to give you feedback. But you also can get a little bit of a sense of what they, as a designer or a hiring manager for a specific studio, are most interested in by, again, asking, what are you most drawn to here? So again, let's talk a little bit about what this can sound like. So imagine that, again, I'm a student in the illustration program. Kayla is my reviewer, and we're preparing to chat about one of my pieces. So I will start and say, this project is called Time. It's a series of editorial illustrations about different emotional experiences of time. I imagined them accompanying a magazine essay about how people relate to time today. Things like deadlines, missed opportunities, and moments when time feels slower.
How did you start developing the ideas?
I began by pulling out key themes that might appear in an article, like time pressure, lost time, and slow time. And then I created a quick mind map of visual metaphors like clocks or hourglasses, falling objects. And then I moved into thumbnail sketches. I made around 20 thumbnail sketches overall to explore the different concepts before selecting what I believe are the strongest ones.
That's great. Typically for editorial work, generating multiple ideas is really important. When you were sketching, how did you decide which concepts were worth developing further?
That's a great question. Thank you. I looked for ideas that communicated the theme quickly and that could be understood without much explanation. I also tried to avoid metaphors that I felt were way too literal or overused.
Yeah, that's great. Let's look at the first image.
Great, thank you. So this first image represents deadline pressure. The figure is being wrapped by the hands of a clock, so time becomes something that's physically constraining them. I experimented with a few different versions of this, but this diagonal composition created the most tension.
I think the concept reads clearly, which is great for editorial. One thing I might suggest is pushing the scale or exaggeration a little bit more and maybe making the clock hands larger or more dominant so the pressure feels even stronger.
Thank you. That actually makes a lot of sense. I could probably emphasize the scale difference between the figure and the clock hands more.
Exactly. Also think about how the images reads at a small size since editorial illustrations are often printed pretty small.
Oh, that's a really great point. Thank you. End scene, right? So, in this first kind of section of our portfolio review, in which Kayla and I are going back, what I started with was describing the overall brief of my project. It's a series of editorial illustrations. I imagine them being contextualized within a magazine, specifically accompanying an essay. And this is the overall theme that I'm looking for. Kayla, my reviewer, then starts to ask me a little bit about my process, and I'm able to share how I came up with ideas and then refined those ideas. And Kayla then gives me feedback. She says, this makes a lot of sense for the work that you're doing. And then she asks me a question about how I further honed my process. So, because I've already been thinking about how to describe my process, I'm really well prepared to answer this question. Then we go into specifically talking about the first image that we see. And I describe what it represents or what I want her to know about this image. And again, how I got to this final version. She then makes a suggestion for how it could read more clearly based on the goal that I shared earlier. So, because I shared my goal with her and I shared my process, Kayla, as my reviewer, is able to give me really strong feedback on what would make me achieve my goal with this particular piece even more effectively, which is really wonderful. I then get to say thank you so much. That sounds really great. And then she gives me a little bit more feedback about potentially how the physical constraints of what I'm working on, in this case, the nature of an editorial or print magazine, might affect the way that my design reads. So I'm talking about both the conceptual process of working through some of my ideas, but then also what do I need to know about the physical experience? And here, I'm relying on Kayla being an experienced designer or experienced recruiter in the field to know that in this particular situation, I might want to kind of up my size because of how it might read based on her knowledge of how this works. And I can say, thank you, that's really, really helpful. What I wouldn't want to do in this situation, ideally, is push back too much and share that her suggestions don't match my goal or that I had already considered that the sizing of my image might be impacted by the constraints of my medium, and that I don't want to make it larger. Sometimes we're going to get feedback that we don't wholly agree with, and that's okay. But what we should try to do is always be gracious and grateful for the feedback, and then we can decide how much of it, if any, we incorporate at a later date. So, moving forward, some other things that we're going to do when we're presenting our work is try to go beyond what our reviewer can see. This is a really great skill set to develop for presenting your work in general. But rather than saying, this is an image, this is an image, here's a sketch, here's a 3D model, etc., we want to encourage our reviewer to see what our process was and what our decision making was for each image that we share. A great way to think about this is, what does this tell you about my process? And how did this image help me get to my final results or my final assets for this project? This again is going to create an opportunity for your reviewer to give you more effective feedback. And it demonstrates that you really know and understand your work really effectively, right? You're able to talk about your process beyond just telling them what they're able to see in front of them, which they likely already know. Second, we're going to try to get clarification. If you're told something by your recruiter that you don't entirely understand, or you feel unsure about how to apply, or you really just want to kind of continue and push the conversation a little bit more intently, you can ask them a clarifying question. So we'll talk about this in the actual context of a review in a second when we go back to our role play. But you might ask, do you have specific recommendations? Or you might even say, when somebody gives you positive feedback, it's really great that you like this piece. Can you tell me what you think the strongest aspects of it are? You're going to then be able to use this information to put in your back pocket. If you love this studio, you know what they like to see based on what they think the strongest aspects of your pieces are, right? You're going to be able to bring that up and talk about it in the future. And you can use those strongest aspects to hone additional projects moving forward. So let's talk about what this is going to look like in an actual interview or portfolio review setting. So Kayla and I are moving to our review and we're looking at some additional images from that same project that I mentioned earlier, titled Time. So I say, this one is about lost time. The figure is trying to catch falling hourglasses that are slipping through their hands. Earlier sketches showed sand running out of an hourglass, but that felt a little bit too predictable. So I switched to the idea of falling hourglasses to create a little bit more motion and something of interest.
I like the movement here. Did you imagine this one appearing in a particular type of layout?
Great question. I thought it could work as a vertical opener for an article, so I arranged the hourglasses to kind of guide the viewer's eye downward through composition.
That's good editorial thinking. One suggestion would be to think about hierarchy a bit more. Right now, the figure and the hourglass compete for attention. Maybe you could adjust the contrast or lighting so the viewer knows where to look first.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. I could probably push the lighting on the figure a bit more so that they become the focal point as well.
Exactly. And the third image?
So this last image represents slow time. The figure is floating inside a clock where the numbers drift apart. And I wanted the spacing and the cooler colors to make the image feel calm and a little bit more open, which is in contrast to the pressure that I was trying to communicate in my first image for this series.
Yeah, that makes sense. Conceptually, that contrast works well. One thing I would encourage is experimenting with more visual variation in the series.
That's a really great point, too. Thank you. I hadn't really thought about varying the viewpoint more. Do you have any specific recommendations?
Yes, I think overall the strength of this project is the conceptual thinking, which is really important for editorial illustration. You might try different perspectives or cropping. Right now, the compositions are somewhat similar in scale. I think if you push the compositions and visual hierarchy a bit more, the image will come across even more clearly.
Thank you. That's really helpful feedback. I'm definitely going to revisit these compositions and see how I can strengthen them. So, end scene again. In this situation, Kayla had a little bit more direct feedback to give me about how to improve my images and how they were reading versus how I intended them to read. Part of the reason why, again, she was able to give me that really strong feedback was because I provided the context for why I was making certain decisions rather than just stating what those decisions were or what she was looking at. Additionally, when I talked about that additional image, and she gave me the feedback that says, I think you might want to experiment a little bit more with visual variation. I didn't really understand what she meant. And that's okay because, sometimes we just don't catch exactly what somebody means, or we just want a little bit of additional clarification. So I thanked her for her feedback, and then I asked if she had specific recommendations. And from this, she was able to give me very specific suggestions that I could work on. And all while we're having this conversation, I'm taking notes. Kayla said this, Kayla recommended that. I might even have kind of two columns, one that says what Kayla recommended to me, and one that says what she really loved. So she said the strength was really in my conceptual thinking, which is really great because I know that means that some of my creative ideas are landing with the community that I'm speaking about. And maybe where I have the greatest opportunity for improvement or growth is in how I'm executing those conceptual ideas in terms of how they're actually reading on the page. And so this was a really wonderful conversation that we've had where I'm getting a nice compliment, I'm getting a lot of wonderful feedback, I'm asking for clarification on that feedback, and she's able to really guide me along the path that is going to be most proactive for both of us. So we've had our conversation. Hopefully, it was nice and lengthy, and I got even more wonderful feedback from some of my other projects in having my chat with Kayla. Now it's really time for me to end effectively and make the most of this conversation. So, first, I'm going to thank Kayla for her time. I'm going to say thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. Your feedback was really helpful, and it's going to help me fill in a lot of the gaps in my portfolio. Again, whether you agree with all of the feedback that you received or not, showing that appreciation is going to be really, really wonderful as a way to extend your conversation and kind of build out goodwill and a stronger network with some of your reviewers moving forward. After I thank Kayla, I really want to find out if I can continue this conversation in the future. So I might ask her, can I have your contact information? Or would it be okay for me to send you a connection request on LinkedIn after this conversation? They may or not be open to giving direct contact information, depending on the context of your interview. But typically, most folks are pretty open to connecting on LinkedIn. So you can make a request for both. And if you're able to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, then you can send them a second thank you. So what I might do is request to connect with Kayla and then send her a follow-up thank you that says, thank you again for taking the time to meet with me today. It was such a pleasure to meet you. I'm really excited to stay connected so that you can, continue to see how my portfolio develops based on your wonderful feedback and suggestions. Now we have a way to stay in contact. Kayla knows that I really appreciated her feedback, that I think she was very kind with her words, etc. And again, I'm practicing my networking skills and my professional communication, which is always really important. But that's not where it ends. Fortunately for us, because we have gone through the work of potentially getting direct contact info or connecting with somebody on LinkedIn or both, we can follow up down the line with somebody that we met and connected with over a portfolio review using one nice, easy trick, we'll say. If you update your portfolio, a specific project or the portfolio on the whole, based on feedback from your reviewer, you can share that with them. So you might send them a quick little email or message, and it might sound something like this. Hi, Kayla. We met during a portfolio review at Art Center in April of 2026. It was such a pleasure to meet you, and I really appreciated the time that you gave me. You gave me some feedback on this particular editorial series about how to be really mindful of my composition and my sizing. And I thought that was really, really helpful. I've actually updated that project and I wanted to share with you where the project is now and how beneficial your feedback was. If you're interested in taking a look, you can find it here, portfolio link. This allows you to not only restart a conversation with your portfolio reviewer, who perhaps is working at a company that you're really interested in interning at or working at in the future, especially if you're preparing to graduate, perhaps. But it also allows you to practice some of those networking skills and really close the loop on a conversation that hopefully you're really grateful to have had the opportunity to participate in. This is something, again, that you can do soon after your portfolio review or a long time after your portfolio review, as long as you give the appropriate context. So I said, hi, Kayla, we met at art center for my portfolio review in April 2026 or May 2026. That reminds Kayla of when we met. So she's not like, I have no idea who this is, or I've done 10 portfolio reviews in the last year. She's able to kind of use that information to contextualize for herself a little bit about what our conversation was, if maybe she doesn't remember meeting with me directly. And then she can choose to go ahead and view my portfolio if she wants to. Some other things that I can do to follow up are potentially invite her to visit me at grad show if she's local, or if she happens to be in Southern California often. I might say, hi, Kayla. Again, it was such a pleasure to meet you at my portfolio review. I'm preparing to graduate with an incredible cohort of designers in a couple of weeks. If you're available, I would really love to see you. Again, I've made some updates to my portfolio based on your feedback. It was so helpful, and I would love the opportunity to show you in person if you would be available to come. Here's the link to sign up to attend grad show if you're interested, and so on and so forth. Again, part of this is about utilizing the immediate time that we have to gain our feedback. And then part of it is about using our networking and our interpersonal communication skills to take best advantage of that connection and that conversation at multiple points moving forward. When we do this, we not only have 15 minutes of a portfolio review, but we potentially have a lifelong communication in our creative community who can support us, provide feedback, be a champion, who knows that we both appreciate and are going to action on the feedback that they gave us, which are two incredible skills and approaches for professional designers working in any field. So, let's wrap up before we get into our time for questions or anything else that anybody wants to talk about. When you're preparing for your portfolio review, make sure you prep your materials. How do you want to share them? Are you going to go through your website? And if so, what is your path or your script through your website? Or are you going to make a PDF? And how much time do you have to do that in order to make it look the way that you want it to? Next, test your technology. Make sure that you're comfortable sharing, that you're in a room with pretty good lighting, where the sound is good, all of those other things that you need to feel confident and comfortable in executing your review as effectively as possible. Know what you want to emphasize, both with your process, with your design goals, or the brief that you're responding to. Directly ask for what you need. If you need clarification on feedback, if you want feedback about a specific aspect of your design approach or your portfolio, you can specifically say that. For example, you might even want feedback on the construction of your portfolio website on the whole, and you can ask that. Does the structure and the format of my portfolio website make sense to you? Do you find it easy to navigate if you would need to? You can make those direct asks. Wrap up and show appreciation. Again, these people are volunteering their time to come and chat with you, and often volunteering their expertise and the ability to share what they have developed for themselves. And so showing appreciation and really understanding that what they are doing is looking to help you develop and improve is going to go very, very far in maintaining that connection. And then finally, follow up effectively to ensure that that connection stays strong moving forward, either via email or via LinkedIn, potentially both, knowing that you can send an immediate thank you and then perhaps follow up again in the long future to update on an actual portfolio project, the structure of your portfolio, or any other feedback that you received over the course of the conversation. This will all be included in a breakdown, both with the recording of this workshop and via a PDF that everybody who's in attendance today will be sent. But for the moment, we have a few extra minutes before we finish up today. So thanks everybody for joining us. And I wanted to open up the floor to any questions that anybody has. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask out loud if you would like to, knowing that we're still recording our conversation. You can also drop a question in the chat if you have one. We'd be happy to answer those as well. If anybody has any questions or concerns that maybe we didn't get to cover during our chat today. Okay, we got a question in the chat. If I would like to create a presentation for 1 to 2 of my projects, approximately how long would you suggest the presentation be? How much time should we usually have for feedback and questions? This is a great question. If you know how long your portfolio review will be, I would suggest that you leave approximately 50-50 time for presenting your work and then receiving feedback on your work. You might not need exactly 50-50 time, but that ensures that you are really allowing yourself and your reviewer as much time as possible to give you suggestions that they have or advice that they have. So if you know that you've been allotted 15 minutes for a portfolio review, right, you might use 7 to 8 minutes to present your work and then plan 7 to 8 minutes for feedback. You might have to be a little bit flexible here, knowing that your reviewer might stop you partway through sharing your work and want to give a suggestion or talk about something more in depth. But try to think about the less time you're speaking, the more time they have for feedback, but they need the context for your work in order to give great feedback. So a 50-50 split is usually a pretty good reference point. How that translates to how long the presentation should be kind of depends on how much you want to say about each piece, and how many projects you're sharing. So I would say maybe slide wise or PDF wise, one introductory slide that shares the presentation brief or the project brief, I should say, a couple of slides of process, and then final images, and then repeat for a second project. If you're only sharing one project, you might be able to get a little bit more in depth into your process and final images, and how you tackled any of those problems along the way. I hope that that answered your question. If you have any other questions, or if you would like to explore that a little bit more in depth, please let me know.
I have a question about the portfolio reviews on Friday.
Mhm.
Uh, you said something about like if your reviewer has like kind of been introduced to your portfolio yet. I was wondering about the process for that and if the reviewers have seen any of our websites or any of our material yet for those portfolio reviews on Friday.
That's a great question. Somebody else on my team is actually managing the entire process of Portfolio Review Day happening this Friday. So they are best able to answer that question. I can find out the answer for that question and include it in my follow-up email with these details, um, if that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
that would be perfect. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. I think regardless, you should anticipate that, even if somebody has seen your portfolio briefly, it benefits you and them to kind of give them a little bit of a refresh because it might
Yeah.
have been a few weeks since they've seen your work. Um, they may have seen your work only in passing. So definitely still use that time to introduce yourself, but I'll find out exactly how much they have seen of the work of students who have been paired already for that particular portfolio review opportunity, and I'll include that in my follow-up. Great question.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. I just have another question about
Yeah.
when you guys did the kind of mock interview style, it seemed like Kayla was kind of, as you were going through your presentation, Kayla was asking a lot of questions during, like, it seems like it's more of kind of like a conversation rather than you present your work and then you have open feedback, or is that kind of just dependent on the reviewer?
That's a great question. It's definitely going to be dependent on the reviewer. In this particular sense, when I introduced myself very early on in the process, I said to Kayla, if you have any questions or would like me to elaborate on anything, please let me know. Um, so I was kind of introducing her or opening myself up to the idea that she could kind of stop me ask a question, or share thoughts along the way.
Mm.
Your reviewer may want to see the entirety of your project or your work and then give feedback. They may want to stop you and give thoughts. It's kind of going to depend on their style and the guidelines that they're working within. For example, for Art Center's portfolio review day happening on Friday, they may have been given specific kind of suggestions for the format of the review. If you're attending a portfolio review outside of Art Center, perhaps one that you have organized directly or one that's happening through like a design convention or something like that, there might be an entirely different set of format expectations. So, a way that you can kind of address this is by, again, introducing yourself and then saying, would you like me to go through each of my projects in full and then we discuss them at the end? Or would you like me to stop partway through for any questions or thoughts that you might have? I would like to respond or present my work in a way that's most effective for you.
Yeah,
That way,
I
you're kind
understand.
of giving them the option to either have a conversation or kind of
Mhm.
be presented to, for lack of a better term, and then respond at the end.
Yeah, that makes total sense that it's kind of like what you open up, or like how you start the interview. Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Those were great questions. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions? Oh, we got one in the chat. I'm going to have two reviews focusing on different design realms. How do I maximize these two different reviews? Is it necessary to address the same project with different approaches depending on the reviewer? That really depends on your goals. Again, having an idea of what your goal is for portfolio reviews before you go in will help you define how you want to approach them. So if you don't know what your goals are yet, for those two different reviews that have two different focuses, I recommend thinking about what those could be. Um, that way, when you are going into them, you have an idea of, okay, this reviewer is in more design research. These are the types of things that I would love to know about design research and what is necessary to succeed or thrive in that type of role. This reviewer does more work in application. And so these are the questions that I would want to have for them, or this is what I would want to know about that type of experience. Once you've defined your goals, then you can address your approach. But that's going to be really dependent on you and who your reviewers are. So I can't give you specific recommendations about what is or isn't necessary for you, but you may find that presenting the same project to two different people and getting different types of feedback from them is helpful. You may decide that two different projects are going to be the most beneficial. I hope that answers your question. If it does not, please feel free to follow up for clarification. We got another question in the chat that said, is it okay to ask about an internship opportunity during the review? The answer to this question is yes. It depends on how you approach that question. If you're doing a review with somebody from a company that you know is currently recruiting for an internship, like they've posted it online, they are actively looking for somebody for this particular role, you can definitely say, additionally, somewhere in the context of your review, additionally, I saw that you are currently recruiting, or the studio is currently recruiting for this internship. I'm very interested in the opportunity. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the skills that you're primarily looking for in this role. Or if there's somebody else on the team who is handling the recruitment of this internship, I'm wondering if you would be able to share with me their name so that I could connect with them on LinkedIn to follow up. If you don't know or have not seen that they have posted a specific internship opportunity, what you may instead say is, I also wanted to mention that Studio is one of my dream companies, and I would really love the opportunity to intern or work with you in the future. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your internship cycles, how you tend to hire interns, and what opportunities, if any, I could look out for moving forward. So kind of preparing yourself based on what you know about how they're hiring and what they're hiring for is going to be really helpful. Keeping in mind that the person that you're meeting with may not be the person who is best able to address your internship search questions. They might be. That might be the reason why they're participating in these reviews, but they also may not be. And so if you kind of couch your question or your request in saying, if there is somebody who might be better able to address my question, I would love to be pointed in the right direction, because I'm so interested in this opportunity and would love to learn more. Great question as well. Thank you guys. Any other questions for me? Again, you're welcome to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat if you're interested. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Again, this workshop has been recorded. So a recording of this will go out hopefully by end of day today or first thing tomorrow morning, along with a PDF resource about preparing for portfolio reviews. For those of you who are going to be participating in the Art Center sponsored portfolio review day happening at the end of this week, we would like to wish all of you both a congratulations and a good luck for your review happening soon. For anybody who is not immediately scheduled for a portfolio review, but is looking to prepare for one in advance, please feel free to schedule time to meet with the Creative Careers team, with myself or with Kayla, to chat about how you can more directly prepare for a portfolio review, or where you might even find opportunities to have a portfolio review if you're not sure how to get started on that front. You can find our contact info on the screen above, and you can also reach out to us via Art Center Connect, which is our platform for scheduling advising appointments. We would love to meet with you anytime. I appreciate you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that this was really helpful. Thank you all for your wonderful questions. Thank you to Kayla for being my wonderful reviewer and giving me great feedback. I'm going to go iterate on that and send you that LinkedIn message in this dream scenario. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you all around campus sometime soon. Bye, guys.